Good afternoon and welcome back all of you again. It's great to see all of you in here on the Zoom room panel. Hope you had a cup of coffee or just a small break. Now I would like to move on to the last session. The subtitle of the plenary discussion is Post-Corona, between calm and passion. Director Janet Blake from Persian Garden Institute for Living Heritage will serve as a moderator today. Before we get started, I'd like to have a little announcement for the public. So as notified already before, if you have any particular questions then you can leave the question on the YouTube chat box from the HCAP's YouTube channel, Korean and English version one. And we will have a time maybe if you just say grab us some good question. Okay, so without further pause, please welcome today's moderator, Director Janet Blake. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for that introduction, and thank you to HCAP for inviting me, and also to the NGO Forum for extending this invitation for me to take part in this very important meeting. And in fact, my congratulations to HCAP for this webinar series that you've put on. This plenary discussion is on post-corona, between calm and passion. So let's hope we have a bit of passion as well as some calm in this discussion. And I would also like to just mention that for me, it's very important. This is my first sort of public international engagement since our NGO was accredited to the committee of the 2003 convention. So it's rather meaningful for me to have this opportunity. Thank you. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has swept through the world and left devastation behind it, but has also starkly highlighted the vulnerabilities that exist in societies around the world. And interestingly enough, some of the greatest vulnerabilities are perhaps in the most advanced societies, which raises some interesting questions for us. But at the same time, we know that the poorest, the weakest, the most vulnerable members of our societies have been particularly hard hit by this, and they include, of course, many of the communities that we work with. And so this is for us a question of extreme importance. How can we support those communities? But I think it also raises some perhaps even deeper questions we may want to address, such as, what is the potential that ICH has that we can harness in the future to confront, to mitigate the impacts of any future such disasters that we face. For sure we'll face them. And also, how can this power, this potential be used better to improve people's lives under normal circumstances as well? I mean, I think the two should really be seen as something that goes together, and to help them to develop better resilience for the future. And perhaps there's an even more profound question we might want to consider, which is, what can we learn from ICH and from the communities that practice ICH to change the way that we operate our world? Because it's clear that the way we're doing things right now causes some fairly serious problems. So I think all of those are the sort of deep underlying questions that we deal with. Do you wish me to make a brief introduction of our discussants, or is that not necessary? Jamal, would you like me to?
Dear Blake, it's totally up to you. So the floor is yours. Yes, of course.
Very, very briefly, yeah? I think it's nice to do that. So, according to the program order that we have, so we have excuse me if I mispronounce any of your names. I'm sorry if I do. So we have Dibya Jyoti Bohra from the Arhi Institute, I believe, in India, who spoke about enlivening the dying tradition of North India and ICH. Sorry, maybe it's not North India, excuse me, of the Karbi tribe in India.
Yes. Yeah.
And we also have Kai Kwong Choi from the Life Encouraging Fund, who spoke about a development project in Yuan Long community and intangible cultural heritage of the community in Hong Kong. And then we have Ghiasuddin Pir and Misa Ubaid, who are from, is it DAP? Is that how you say your name of your NGO? You spoke about promoting heritage education through ICH in the Kalisha valleys of Pakistan. And we also have with us Jeff, is it Pulin? From Creative Generation. And you spoke about innovation for arts and cultural education in time of pandemic. And we have Julio Nasher, if that's correct, from the ICCN Secretariat, talking about popular reactions to COVID-19 with specific reference to Algamesi in Spain, where you were planning to hold the General Assembly of ICCN and you had to go all virtual, but also how people of that area responded. Then from the third session, we have Alessio Re and Giulia Avanza from the Santa Gata Foundation for the Economy of Culture, who spoke about the Southwestern Alp region and ICH in that region, and empowering communities through youth education and nature and cultural practices. And Joseph Lowe from the World Crafts Council International on crafting a post-COVID-19 world. So that's exactly the point that I was referring to, and how greater resilience can be built in the craft sector. And finally, but by no means least, we have Nick Kozek from Asian Legal Programs of Columbia University, speaking about arts and influence and how corporate engagement in the cultural sector has its advantages and also its challenges, and what that means obviously for ICH communities. And I would like to start by asking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask fairly open questions that I would be interested for each of you to, respond to them. And if just for sake of making this a bit simpler for everybody, if you don't mind being first stepping up to the plate each time, is it Dibya? Should I call you Dibya? Is that correct? Or you? Yeah,
Dibya, yeah.
Yep. That's all right, is it? Thank you. If you don't mind, I just put, since you're first on my list, you're going to be the first for the first question. Okay. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is this, that from the experience you have with the projects you've been doing on the ground, first of all, in a very general sense, how do you think that ICH can work to improve the resilience of the communities that you know? And equally importantly, what is the role that NGOs play in this? What is the specific role of NGOs in all this? Particularly since NGOs have a strange duality. They're often outsiders, but they may also be insiders in a sense. I know it's a very open question, but this is just to leave you the possibility to give your, what you think about this.
Thank you, ma'am, for giving us this opportunity, and thank you, UNESCO ICHCAP, also for giving us opportunity for talking about our work and for question also. First, regarding this question, I just want to focus upon the area we are working on. It is a northeastern part of India, which is actually it's a very front line, very far from the mainstream India. Even within India, many people does not know much about these areas, and that area is home to numerous tribes. So as this is numerous indigenous tribes are living here, so is the ICH. So it's very rich in ICH, and it's even in pre-COVID situation also, the ICH is in decay. I mean, it is in the form of, in the on the verge of extinction. So we had already working for last 18 years. We are working for the safeguarding of ICH in different format, whether it's a craft, whether it's a song. And especially right now, we are working on reviving the dying tradition. Actually, the dying tradition has become complete obsolete since the colonialism have came to India. When the British came, the synthetic dye came. So then community have started abandoning the dye practice and synthetic dye came. So natural dyeing is like almost 2-3 elders are living who knows the practice of this thing. And I think ICS itself is reviving. ICS is itself resilient. I mean, resilient to different problems that's posed by us, like COVID also. We emphasize that because if we say it's a dyeing, that we emphasize on natural dyeing. And natural dyeing products are so natural and so good. And it is become so, many diseases. It can prevent many diseases. It can boost your immunity. It can boost the community's immunity. But the thing is that when the natural dyeing is not absent, I mean, this practice is not prevalent, only synthetic dye was present. So in that situation, there are a lot of things that to be learned from the ICFs that are on decay. The community is losing, and the NGO's role is paramount, I think, in this, because the community, we as an NGO, my NGO name is Arhi. Arhi means example in our local language. So we try to provide communities an example that this can be done like this, because generally what we do, we initiate a project, then we carry on, then later on the project is carried by community itself, and it has been replicated in most of the part of our region, because my region is like that. There are more than 300 tribes and sub-tribes. It's more than 600 tribes, and it's like every tribe is very diverse. Their practices are diverse. Even within dyeing also, some one community do 3 colors, some community do 9 colors, some community do 20 colors. So it's a very diverse type of knowledge system that we are losing. Okay, so we
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you there because there's quite a lot of discussants, and I'm
okay. Thank you
so much. Can I perhaps ask you all if you have something you want to say? Do you want to stick your hand up, and then I'll know that who wants to address this? But since I can see some faces that are appearing in front of me, could I perhaps ask you, Alessio? I see you there. Do you have something to add to this?
Sure. Thank you, Janet. Yes, the 2 questions you posed are very core. How ICH can help support, improve resilience, and the role of NGOs. What I'm noticing here in the experience in Italy especially, but not only, there was already in spring a sort of rush towards the use of technology, like being present through technology, through social media, through anything, cultural, different actors, institutionals and less institutionals were trying to keep the dialogue with their, let's say, audience, with their people. But clearly it's emerging. It emerged quite immediately that the technology is not enough. In my opinion, this emergency is stressing the fragilities that were already present. And I believe ICH in general, I'm a bit generalizing, but ICH is, if not the most, is among the most fragile dimension, because it's based on social relationships. Now, in, let's say, I don't know if 100% of cases, but absolutely in almost all cases, it's based on social relationships. So the role of ICH is crucial because it's probably the most fragile, and it's crucial also because it could help in keeping communities cohesion, also versus the institutional kind of paralysis that also happened. No, in the uncertainty, institutions are very slow in taking decisions. And the last point that I want to mention is that we should be smart enough in using the intangible dimension of culture for refocusing and reconverting the cultural contents. In other words, to help the people right to access culture in a moment where cultural places, because of it's impossible to visit places because museums are locked, etc., are inaccessible, averagely speaking, to people. So these are my points.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else want to particularly jump in now, rather than me inviting each of you? I'm very happy for you just to do so. If not, I'm just going to pick a face off my screen again. Okay. It seems to me that the last point that was mentioned is one that maybe for, is it Nick Kozak? Kozak?
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, that's you. It might maybe speak to what you do, this issue about access to culture.
Yeah, and I love that I was the cold call, or the first cold call of the evening.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
you want
I would. I mean, what I would actually sort of circle back to another point about the fragility of culture, and that's that intangible cultural heritage is also, as much as it's fragile, as much as something that we need to protect, it's also something we can learn quite a lot from about resilience, and it's this thing that we can leverage in learning how to persist and survive and engage and find meaning in a world that is turbulent, and that we are in a place in which we are not going to recover or reset, but are instead going to reimagine our future. And that future is going to have intangible cultural heritage as a part of it. And so understanding the scope of that continuity, what that arc of time is going to look like, is the prerogative of the field. And to really not imagine just encasing intangible cultural heritage and trying to shelter it and keep it safe, but to really, really, really draw on the practices that have brought warmth and humanity. That's going to be our sustenance.
Thank you very much. That's because that really speaks to the final point that I mentioned earlier. You know, how are we going to, use this knowledge for, as you say, reimagining our future? It's clearly that our present is broken in a lot of ways, and what is the role of ICH in responding to that? I realize, to my shame, that so far all of the people I've invited to speak have been men. So I shall pull from my list. I've been seeing, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing you correctly, Misa?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah, is that correct? Hi, yeah. Do you want to pitch in here?
Yes.
Your thoughts? Please.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to add on to what has already been discussed here. So we have been working in the Kalasha Valley, and they're like a very small number, just 3,800 left in the world, and they're the smallest indigenous community of our country. So we realize that ICH is very, very important for their survival, and that's exactly what we have been working, trying to safeguard their intangible and tangible heritage since 2015. But recent, events have proved to be really difficult in a way that those people do not have, of course, the world is shifting to a digital form now, but, those people do not have stable internet connections. And so things are becoming disconnected for them, and it's becoming quite difficult. On the other hand, we realize that this is also an opportunity that those people got. So, the youth was actually not very interested in. So there's a lot of intergenerational transfer of knowledge of their practices, their, systems. And that's something that was, to a very bare minimum now. The youth wasn't interested, didn't have enough time. However, with, how the schools have been shut down and they don't have anything else to do, we realize this is one way how, the elders are taking advantage of this time and trying to transfer offer their ICH and their practices to the youth. So this was a good thing that we realized. And they are a very resilient community. They have been trying and they have survived over all these years, faced a number of issues like forced conversions, issues from the different communities. But because they've survived and because they've been working on all this time, so it seems that yes, it's going towards something positive also.
Thank you. And well, you were talking about young people making their presence felt, which is lovely. Okay. I also am interested, as I mentioned before. I see that Joseph has raised a hand. Apparently, Joseph.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, hi.
This is with reference to your sort of initial question on the role of NGOs in building resilience. I think one of the things that at WCC World International World Craft Council is doing and thinking about it is that perhaps documentation is very important about how NGOs face crisis, so that if there's a COVID-25 or COVID 30, for example, 10 years from now, you can refer to what has happened before now, so that we can be more prepared in terms of building examples. And I think we need to, pandemic is only one form of global crisis. There's the financial crisis, the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. There was the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s, the SARS, in East Asia in 2003. Now, these are all crises. So the question is, for me, what did NGOs do in the face of those crises before, so that if there is another financial crisis or there's another pandemic or another earthquake or whatever, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but actually there's a whole a resource of knowledge that we can draw upon to use. So I think the documentation and the learning process is really important. And the role for this, I think, is where NGOs can really play a part, to document practices so that, we can draw on resources and experience to face future crises. Thank you.
So if I hear you have a very concrete proposal that may be something worth the NGO forum taking on board, considering how this could be done, even starting with ourselves as a primary resource for this. And I think also we should perhaps be even more ambitious, which is, sure, resilience in the face of crisis, which is also what I said at the beginning. But, we can see that an awful lot of these crises that you mentioned are all ones that we have created for ourselves by the way we organize ourselves. Yes. And, now that with the latest, the COVID-19, we are seeing clearly that a lot of the issues to do with biodiversity destruction and, pushing communities that are on the edge to, eating bushmeat, whatever it may be, that all of this is contributing towards creating the next crisis as well. So I think that, yes, we're in a very key position to identify a lot of these things and to see how the current organization of society is impacting on communities around the world. And I think that is really a very important point. Thank you. I think also there's another question about the role of NGOs, because, NGOs have a very interesting position. But on the one hand, often being, if not insiders in the communities, at least being very well connected with the communities and well accepted by them. But at the same time, in some countries, having access, let's say, to governmental bodies as well. So I think one question here is, how far do you think, as NGOs, we can leverage that position that we have to influence also how governments look at the question of both safeguarding ICH and more broadly these other implications that we have spoken about, but particularly with regard to how ICH can be, as we've said, leveraged to respond to a number of social challenges, social, economic, cultural, environmental, you know, the whole bundle. Does anybody want to come in on that? Was that a really big question? Okay. In that case, I will leave that question sort of, yeah, please go ahead.
No,
yeah.
I was raising my hand. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. Well, I don't see it. Sorry, Ananya. I'm not seeing your hand anywhere, so you're just going to have to butt in there. Yeah, go ahead. Nice to see you.
Yeah, it's a very important question, and I wanted to share the experience from India. And you know, Nisa actually gave that shared already. What we realized that when the market is no longer there, the market got disrupted, right? The tourism is not there, the festivals are not there, events are not there. So one role where NGOs, we call ourselves like the cultural brokers and facilitators, what we can do is keep the communities engaged in their ICH. And for this, you know, the funds for the events, the funds for the festivals, those can be used for, you know, supporting training programs, learning programs, documentation programs. So this really created a very positive effect. One was, of course, you know, supporting the cultural practitioners to perform online, to give them that scope, that opportunity. The other was supporting, you know, training programs, workshops, documentation. Because what happens, the masters or the gurus, they are always busy. They're traveling, they're going to various places. So this was an opportunity when we found that they were available. They were with the community. So this was something we did, and we came out with a lot of recording of music, on documentation, and you know, sometimes even these artists, they themselves innovated. We have a storytelling community who paint long stories on scrolls and sing them. And the one lady, she first painted a story on COVID and the impact of COVID. And she did a video and then she posted it in Facebook. And that went viral with a 1 million reach. Now, seeing that, a lot of others got inspired. So galleries approached them. They did online exhibition. There was a publication which used that art to talk about the impact of pandemic. So, you know, these are the playthings, the ways how NGOs can play a role, and they can negotiate with the government to give this fund, which is available with the government for supporting programs and events which are not happening, that can be invested in the capacity building, documentation, training. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ananya. And I do apologize again for not seeing your hand. I don't know where it appeared. And indeed, I mean, I think this points, doesn't it, to such an important issue that at the end of the day, I mean, we constantly repeat this point that the real experts are the bearers. But I think it's something that goes beyond simply knowing their ICH, which of course is true, but it goes to often they're actually the people that, when faced with the challenge of responding to a new situation or whatever, they are the ones who really understand what they can do. But they may need some degree of support, as you say, in this case, financial or otherwise, and that NGOs can be the kind of the bridging mechanism, the facilitator to bring that support into the communities and to provide a sufficient degree of, you know, whether it's training or whatever, to then give the opportunity to the community members to take that themselves and do something with it. And for sure, they're likely to do so, as you gave that wonderful example. And in fact, this does kind of bring me to another of the questions that I had, which is, you know, that we know that as the convention itself recognizes, ICH is something that is developed in response to the environment, whatever that environment may be. And that as the environment changes, you know, it will evolve. And so one question I have is, you know, how do you see ICH evolving in response to the current crisis, but even beyond that, you know, in terms of just that life has moved on. I mean, in the last 20 years, life has moved on incredibly in terms of how we live our lives. And this flexibility, this internal inbuilt flexibility is something very key to the nature of ICH. And do you have examples of how this has happened, you know, how communities have changed what they do in response to their shifting environment?
Dr. Blake, sorry for interrupt, but actually the Mr.
Yep.
Dr. Blake, sorry for interrupt, but Mr. Pierre, Justin Pierre, actually holding his hands to speak something regarding the questions.
You know what? I'm not seeing the hands for some reason, so please do tell me. Go ahead.
So when you just say open up the chat box and the participants list, you can see the hands on there.
I have the chat box, but nope.
The participants list.
Open, but the hands are not showing.
Oh, okay then. I'll let you know. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I can, sure, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to say something because I haven't been able to attend yesterday, but Misa and I have both been working with the Kalash people over the past almost 5 years now. And this is a problem that we've had to face being an NGO working with the Kalash community. And honestly speaking, there's been a lot of mistrust towards NGOs as well. And I remember before going to the Kalash rallies, one of the articles that I read, it started off with a community member who was the first community member from the community who spoke English, and he could also write English. And he wrote this article, and the first 3 lines of that article were, "No more NGOs." So the trouble was that there were some traditional mechanisms within that community which allowed them to sort of come together and solve their own problems. With external funding coming in, what resulted in was, let's say, an issue that used to be solved communally by, let's say, 200 people in a community, albeit 4,000 members. What started happening was that some of the more literate people and some of the more, let's say, the kind of community members who could interact with outsiders, because the Kalash had always some few members of the community who'd always interacted with linguists and anthropologists and these sorts of people from the late 19th century onwards. So they know people like us, they know how exoticized they are, they know people like to take their photographs and so on and so forth. But some of the issues that I feel that the NGO sector has not dealt with well have been pretty much understanding intercommunal structures that exist, and they've also unknowingly disrupted some of those things. But there have been well-meaning initiatives, and some of the other things, and I don't know how possible this is, but with a number of indigenous communities, I suppose, across the world, one of the problems, I won't say a problem, but the NGO sector in Pakistan has generally tended to develop parallel to, let's say, political movements. And they've tended to sway away from, let's say, political problems that these communities have. And I think culture has generally been a safe space to play. And some of the problems, particularly for the Kalash community, have been political problems. So it's a very complex sort of an issue that where the NGO sector actually lies when addressing problems. So I think one of the things that perhaps the NGO sector should do or can do, I suppose, is try to sort of broaden where they can pretty much form that bridge between the governments across the world, rather, and indigenous communities the world over. Because at the moment, particularly in the Kalasha community, some of the real issues as far as why they're actually diminishing in number, they tend to be too sort of difficult issues, and they tend to be like, so, for instance, a thing like forced conversion is something that we cannot take up in public. So,
understood.
I mean, we need to sort of figure out how we can actually address these issues. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, that's a very important point and a very important one side of the coin. I think the other side is the fact that often governments have not up till now understood how useful the NGOs can be to them. And I think one of our jobs is really to work on educating governments. I know there's a lot of resistance. I mean, I'm based in Iran, so I can understand this very well. But I think it's very much about, by what we do, showing the governmental authorities that we're actually taking also a load off their back. Doing, especially with the 2003 convention, which is so challenging to many governments, this bottom-up approach. They really haven't got a handle as to how to do this yet. And, NGOs are an incredibly important resource for them too, to help them to implement this participatory approach, etc. So, I mean, in a way, to turn that negative to a positive, let's say, is one of the things is to work on that. But I mean, it's hugely challenging. And in many countries, also, even NGOs don't have a legal status that allows them to do a lot of things they need to do. There's a lot of work to be done in that. With regard to coming to the question of NGOs and the government, because I think it's an important point. What sort of advice, if you were in a position advising governmental authorities on working with ICH and ICH communities, particularly in the areas of sustainable development and resilience, what are the primary bits of advice that any of you would want to give to the governmental authority in question? I mean, imagine we're talking about the Ministry of Culture first, yes? But maybe not just Ministry of Culture, it could be other ministries too. Have you any of you general points of advice that you would want to give to those governmental interlocutors of yours? And again, if anybody puts their hand up, please tell me because I don't see it. Yeah, hi, go ahead. Yep. Yes,
can I come in, please?
Yes, of course, please. Is it
okay,
Alan? Is that your first name? Yeah.
Yes, that's my first name.
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me?
Please. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to reinforce the point that was submitted by Kia's pair, talking about the relationship between NGOs and the government. So I just want to share my experiences in Africa. I'm from Africa in Zimbabwe, which is Southern Africa. So one of the most pervasive, thinking in Africa is that NGOs are more trouble causers than problem solvers. There's been an interpretation by the majority of governments that NGOs, they are trouble causers. I don't know where this kind of thinking is coming from the governments in Africa, but most of them, they will tell you that they do not have faith in these NGOs. I don't know whether it's on the part of maybe the NGOs are exposing the evils of the governments, or it's on our part as NGOs that we sometimes push some of the political agendas for certain reasons that I don't even know. But there's a very big rift between the NGOs in Africa and the governments. One of the lecturers once mentioned that NGOs are uneasy bedfellows, trying to explain that there's no coexistence between the government and the NGOs. So the implementation of certain projects, whether it's ICH or issues of advocacy or issues of good governance or issues of elections or anything that is related to sustainable development, it has been seen to be something which is not untenable because of the relationship which is not good between the government and the NGOs. So it is very difficult for the NGOs in Africa to push the ideas of rewiring the social fabric or cultural healing in the communities, or even fostering some symbolic reparations. So it's very difficult for us. So there is need for some assistance or for some mediation from outsiders to try and create that relationship and rebuild or to revitalize that relationship between the NGOs and the government, so that the government may see that, no, we are not the enemy here, but we have a common enemy, which is the crisis, which are pandemics, which are outbreaks, which are invasions, which is hunger, which is poverty, that we together, the government and the NGOs, can sit down together and come up with solutions so that we work together and work with the communities, whether we are doing community inventorying or whether we are working together in documenting or working together in coming up with projects that are supporting the girl child or its education system. There is need for a mediation from outside to bridge the gap.
Yeah, can I just stop you there and ask you a question? When you say mediation from outside, what is this outside you're talking about? I mean, where are you talking about here?
I deliberately say this because there is no trust between the NGOs. For example, in Zimbabwe, there is no trust between the NGOs inside the country and the government. So I'm talking about maybe, for example, we have our neighbors, we have Botswana, we have South Africa, we have Zambia, we have Mozambique. Maybe there is a need for guys from South Africa to come in and sit us down so that they tell us that, no, you guys, these are not the enemies, but we have a common enemy, which is the crisis. So let's sit down, these guys, and come up with some memorandum of understanding, I don't know, or whether we come up with the projects where we'll be working together with the government, because we do not work against the government, but we want to work with the government for the people. Because, yes, so that's the reason why I continue saying, yes.
This is an important problem, and it's a problem that NGOs in many places of the world face. We have to be realistic about this. In some cases, also the governments are very suspicious that NGOs may actually be sort of fifth columnists working for outside interests and other governments. So that's also an issue that we have to be very careful about here. But it depends on your context. There are other countries, in fact, where one of the keys to be able to work in different areas and even to get a better relationship with the governmental authorities is actually working through certain traditional mechanisms that exist. In Iran, for example, where work with regard to female genital cutting was very effective was when the local imams became involved. And so there's a sort of interesting kind of circularity here that maybe we're NGOs working with ICH, possibly depending on the context, the country context, that there are actually existing traditional mechanisms in society that can help to mediate as well, that the government respects as much as you do. I mean, that's also, I'm not telling you that is for you the best strategy. I'm just saying for some places. I mean, I can tell you in Iran that trying to involve one of our neighboring countries would not be a good move. So anyway, we have a little bit of time, not much left. It's such a rich discussion. But let me just invite, I believe I've got Jeff. I haven't heard from you, Jeff. Is that correct? Are you there? I can't see you. If not, also Julio? Is Julio with us? No? Hi, Miguel. Yeah, okay, Miguel, go ahead. I've got you in gallery and I can see you now. Okay. Please pitch in whatever you like to about any of the topics we've discussed.
Well, the main point I think is that heritage is a route for resilience. I mean, the COVID may be terrible, but heritage has normally outlived various difficult times through ages. So, I mean, the main point is how the heritage, in fact, is a factor for resilience. It's very harmed because of this pandemic, because, as Alessio said before, usually the social gathering is part of how we express heritage values. But that fact that the social gathering around it is precisely what guarantees the resilience of the societies that practice it. In the case of NGOs, you see, we are sort of in a different position. Here is not an NGO trying to help heritage, to leverage it, but just to show it around. I mean, it works apart from us. So I cannot be very useful there.
Yeah, well, no, that was useful up to there. Thank you very much. But also, I mean, you say, yes, heritage is a route for resilience, but we've been talking about also the question of influencing governments, and governments at different levels. We're not necessarily talking central government. We could be talking municipal level authorities. You know, how much do you think it's possible to bring that message to authorities at different levels and really persuade them that this is a resource they have and that they could be using it much, much more in responding to such crises?
Well, absolutely.
And
I mean,
how would you go about doing that?
Absolutely. The thing is that, in fact, is the heritage which has built the municipalities before, no? So I think it's the other way around. The heritage is previous to municipal authorities.
Okay, sure. But now, I'm saying that now it's there in front of them as a kind of resource that they could harness to have a better impact, to have a, you know, more perhaps long-lasting impact of their policies if only they would take it into account. How well do you think they can be persuaded of that?
Well, in our case, we have a very good relation with the municipality because we are in fact joined by the municipality. The municipality is part of our intercity intangible cultural network. So it's really a club of municipalities that share their own heritage. I think the form to act is this type of meetings, just to expand and make known our own heritage.
Indeed. Thank you very much. And is there anybody else that we have with us who wants to add something that you know, for example, I see, well, Meg, I see you're there. Do you have anything to add? I'm sure you've got lots to say.
I don't hear you.
No. Or also Matti. Is it Matti there? Yeah? Hi. Do you want to say anything?
Yes. Thank you for this very interesting points and ideas. Actually, many things I could be commenting, but maybe just some key things that kind of came up to my mind. I think this pandemic situation is very important for the ICH NGO communities and for the NGOs. It's It's an impossibility show that ICH, it actually creates stability and resilience, and I think all the governmental and bodies would like to have that happen in their countries, and this is something we have to work with. And of course, everything we have discussed here is kind of saying the same thing, but I'd like to point out, Joseph said in her she said that there would be like an idea of database about the learning of the role of ICH, of what we have done and what the communities, how they, what kind of good safeguarding practices they have found out in this situation. And I think this is something very, very important, and exactly thinking about the future, so that this won't be the last crisis we will have. This probably won't be the last international, like a global crisis that we will have. So it's very essential that we gather the data, the knowledge we have, and then we have a means to distribute it. And this will also, if we do this, the NGOs, we do this work good, we will also get the communities and the governments will understand our work better, and I think it's a very long process, but this is something we have to do.
In fact, since we know that disaster management, prevention, mitigation, and ICH is one of the priorities of the Intergovernmental Committee, it strikes me that this is an excellent opportunity for the NGO Forum to really sort of put its stamp and say, look, you're interested in this, and we are doing something. Our very existence, not just what we're doing, I think this is important, but our very presence on the ground in our existence is part of the answer. And I think that, I agree with you, and I thank Joseph for that proposal. That is something that the NGO Forum, in a kind of formal sense, may well want to.
I don't hear you.
To take up, and consider doing something very specific about this. Thank you. Now, Jin Young, I don't know, do I have any more time or not?
I'm not continuing.
Yes, Dr. Blake, actually you have about 10 minutes. You can use the 10 minutes more if you have any final words or so. Hello, can you hear my voice?
I do, yes. Can you just repeat the last bit?
Okay, so you actually have about 10 minutes. Also, you can actually use the 10 minutes more. So if you have any final words, you can actually do that. And then, or if somebody misses a miss, yes.
Well,
if somebody doesn't miss it, you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I do that, if I do want to give as much opportunity to people, who want to say something, to say it. If you've spoken already, don't worry, pitch in again. I've got you in gallery, so just show, okay, I can see Allington wants to speak. Raise the hand, because I'm not seeing the raised hand in chat, so just stick your hand up, and I've seen Allington. Anybody else? I would very much like, okay, right. Is it Hong Xinhua? Yeah, you're second? Okay, I better write names down, so, and Joseph, yeah?
Can everyone hear me?
Okay, yes. Miguel, who's speaking at the moment? Yes. Okay, because Hong Xinhua has not spoken yet, I give him the first opportunity. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Xinhua Hong, and I am...
Sorry, Xinhua Hong.
Yeah, it's fine. I'm the International Affairs Manager here at CICS. First of all, it's a great honor to be in the presence of such great minds and hearing such great ideas about ICH sustainability and of those contents. I just wanted to add on to what Dr. Blake mentioned regarding the ICH evolving, with the times and the environment. So with our NGO CICS, we acted as a secretariat for the Cheonju City in our second annual ICH awards this year, and it was primarily held online. It was actually just held online, yeah, all of it on the YouTube platform. And I just wanted to add that the evolving, shifting of ICH activities to the online setting is something that is definitely here to stay. And some of the things that we noticed were that the NGOs of Korea all geared towards that change of moving online, either the inventories or online activities such as Zoom meetings. And I think one of the biggest problems that we faced were that the ICH bearers and practitioners, oftentimes they're older people, and they were not able to fully get in onto the online realm as easily as somebody that of the younger generations. So the solutions that we came up with were to make sure that the empowerment and the ownership of the digital footprint of ICH bearers were told to the ICH bearers, and the importance and the ownership of their thoughts and their data and things like that would need to be into the online realm. So we just we believe that the digital divide needs to between the ICH bearers and the community needs to the gap needs to be shortened, and that would be one of the goals of the NGOs of Korea is to be working on.
Thank you very much. I am an eternal optimist. So the way I see what you're saying is also, is this possibly a way actually to engage young people more actively with ICH too, since they are often the ones in the society with those skills required, and it can actually be a way of bringing them directly into the story, and suddenly one can hope that it might actually make these elements more relevant to them in a way too. That's just a thought. But I think also that doing things online, although it has serious challenges, it also has a potential to democratize as well and to open up the process. And I think that's also an aspect of it that is very important. We should consider how, as NGOs, therefore, we can support bearer communities to do more stuff online, as you say, while feeling that their interests are protected, and giving them the, putting them in the driving seat, as it were. Now, I remember that, Allington, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I wanted to add something.
Thanks. Okay.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. No, right. Speaking of ICH and resilience, I just wanted to be brief and say this in passing. I think one of the most important things about intangible cultural heritage is that it speaks volume to the issue of coexistence. I mean, long-lasting or long-living traditions that bring people together, and we're talking about solidarity. And that oneness, that togetherness, that unity is the one that can make the people around the globe to be able to cope with changes in the world and how to come up with creative interventions to combat or fight pandemics or crises that we may face. And to respond to the issue of NGOs and the government at municipal level, I think it's very important for NGOs to complement the work that is done by the government or the municipal bodies. Whether they are doing an outreach program, we can just maybe come in and help them and work with them because NGOs are in a better position to mobilize the community and be a voice with and for the community. So I think it's very much important for NGOs to work with the municipal bodies or the government to help the communities to come up with these interventions that can help them heal as a people. So speaking of ICH, it's very much important to notice and to understand that we cannot do anything. We cannot achieve anything if we have different, if we don't agree or if we speak with different voices, but there is a need for one voice. That doesn't mean that people are not different. We come from different backgrounds, but we can be united in our diversity. And that is very important. If we put that into consideration and into play, then we can fight anything or any pandemic or any outbreak or any crisis that comes in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's your outtake from the meeting, that one there.
Yes.
Yes. Joseph, you wanted to have a word as well, is that right?
No, just a very short interjection with regards to what Marty has said. I think in terms of documentation, anecdotal stories are important to give it life, all right? I mean, but then more importantly, I think you really need data and statistics to back up your anecdotal stories. And I find that this is most important because especially in terms of talking to government from the side of NGOs, because, you know, they hear stories all the time. But then what you really need is actually statistics, hard statistics and facts and data to bring up to the government. Now, I think this is when, you know, it becomes evidence-based. And therefore, when you talk with credibility and not just making noise and irritating with just endless stories that they have. And this is what we found in Bhutan, that whenever we want to talk to the government, we have got to come up with facts and data, and therefore homework is very important. So in relation to this documentation of the pandemic and reactions and responses to this pandemic, it will be good to have some data to back up, you know, evidence and your stories, both successful and non-successful, so that we know where we stand and we can take it forward. So this is my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, and I mean, it kind of goes to the heart of a lot of the challenge of any kind of reporting in this area, which is, you know, to balance quantitative with qualitative information and data, because we need both, essentially. You're right. I mean, we need the qualitative, we need the story, but we also, equally, we need to speak to governments in terms that they generally, let's say, understand. I mean, use the language that they use, and the quantitative is also very important in that. I think that's probably the 10 minutes that you gave us used up. Do you want to kind of wrap up now?
Oh, actually, Dr. Blake, I see the hands from the Miss Rimshak.
Okay, and also Meg too. I mean, so let's go in that order then. Yes. So the first was, yes.
Hi. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Blake. Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the issue of working with the government and how we can, or as NGOs, how we can do that best. I think it's really important that the NGO is relevant. And this is something I think Nick mentioned. It's relevant to the existing plans of the government. They're hardly going to find support from a government if, let's say, we're in a crisis and then there's this NGO that's working on luxury goods or something like that. In this in the existing crisis, as well as in any crisis, the priorities of countries and of governments change. And so NGOs have to be really realistic about changing their priorities as well. And this might mean that certain cultural expressions or ICH elements might have to take precedent over others. So for example, if we're in this global economic crisis caused by COVID or caused by wars, such as, okay, I'm in Syria right now. So, I mean, being in a crisis isn't new to us. There are economic interests that not just the government has, but that communities have. So I am more likely to get support from my government working on an ICH element that does have an economic aspect. I mean, not for the government, for the community itself, rather than working on ICH that only perhaps targets the values of participation and equality and hope. Because, yeah, unfortunately, these things do get pushed back and they do have to take a second seat behind things or ICH elements or culture in general. It's so easy for culture to be a secondary or a luxury when you're at war or you're in a crisis. So the trick here is for NGOs to be able to adapt to this crisis, to an emergency situation, and say, yes, it's true, I am working in culture, but the benefit of working in culture can be so much more than just being a luxury or a privilege for people. It does carry economic benefits that can help pull the nation or the community out of this current crisis. So it's about being constantly adapting and being relevant and being able to show just the different facets of what we're doing.
Thank you. And also, I think to add to that, we work in the field of culture, but I think we shouldn't restrict our view of who we work with in government to simply the Ministry of Culture or equivalent, because often I think what we do is better understood in other ministries in terms of what we do on the ground. And I think that's something we also should to take on board. I think it's very appropriate if we give this time to Meg now as our chief, to whom we owe obedience. And if you wish to, say some words, and even a kind of, not a wrap up as such, but, you've listened to a lot of ideas today, and, how you...
Yeah, I realize economic is important, but social is very important too, not just economics.
Yeah, I think you're right, indeed. Thanks. Meg, do you want to, obviously you may have had a point you wanted to make, but if you want to go beyond that too and draw out some of the other points that you've heard today, that'd be great.
Thank you, Janet. And I would just like, listening to this discussion here, I would just like to, there were many points and many good ideas, but just to have some few points. There was a talk about a database to have the experience on how handling crisis. I think it's really good. However, I also would like to point out that the UNESCO has started this survey, and there is a place where you can write about your experience during the COVID. So if not everyone have seen it, please visit the UNESCO website, and you will be able, you think you will be able to hand in your experience, or otherwise you at least can read and learn from others. And then we were talking about the government and the relationship between governments and NGOs. And of course, this varies a lot over the world. I myself is working in Sweden, live in Sweden, and we have a very good cooperation with municipality, region, and national government. But that's not the case all over the world. From the point of the ICH NGO Forum, I really think we can work on this topic on an international level. For us, it might be difficult to go into specific countries, but we can show, and that is what I think the ICH NGO ICH NGO Informed does show that we are relevant and useful to the convention, to the committee, with our seminars where we raise the question that we know will be discussed in the agenda. And we are trying also now to find new ways of being advisors, how we can advise the committee. So this is an ongoing process and a work that we are doing in the forum to prove our usefulness and how we can help and be relevant. And as you said, Jenna, take the burden off the government. So I also would like to agree to what my colleague in the forum, Reem, just said, that we need to be relevant and show how we can help societies in all ways. So yeah, that's my remarks on this discussion. Thank you all for participating. It's really good listening to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Meg. And indeed, I also wanted to suggest myself that the NGO forum's, position with regard to the committee is a key one for, a bit of persuasion and education of the governments of the states parties, to show that the NGOs around the world are actually a positive resource for them, and that our aim is not to sort of act as fifth columnists and bring down the regime, which seems to be what some of the governments feel that we're up to. Yeah. But I mean, we have to recognize at the same time that, as I said, the whole paradigm that is established by the 2003 convention is very challenging to many governments. It's asking them to do things in the heritage field they've never had to do before. And the primary one is to listen to bearer communities. And, I cannot tell you how many times in my region I've been doing capacity building workshops, and I've been told by experts from the Ministry of Culture, who are very often from a sort of anthropological or similar background, telling me, but why should we listen to the communities? What they tell us is wrong about their heritage. So, we have to understand that there is a deep challenge going on, here with regard to the whole participation idea, and that NGOs are often perceived as some of the ones at the forefront of making that challenge. And so, in a way, a lot of what we have to do is also to change the discourse so that we are not seen to be on the side of challenging the government, but we're actually seen to be partnering with governmental authorities. And that language becomes a language in which we speak with each other. But it's not an easy message to get across in some places, we know that. So I think we've covered quite a lot of ground today, and some really interesting and important points have been raised. What would you like me to do now?
Dr. Blake, I think you just summarized all the points what we discussed during the plenary discussion.
Yep.
And then we did also the final word. We got the final word from the presenters. So it seems like I don't have to open up the floor to the presenters. Am I clear?
I think everybody has had a chance to speak and say their piece. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'll just close the plenary discussion and then saying last words for this conference. So, first of all, thank you everyone. Thank you all the presenters and the moderators. During the plenary discussion, we dealt about the diverse issues. From the micro to macro viewpoints, NGO to government, and then each country's situation under the title of ICH and the Resilience, which is our conference title. And also we just deeply considered and then discussed and shared a thought about the strength, weakness, and opportunities and threats that we are just facing with in not only in current situation but also from the past and thinking for the future also. So it was a very helpful, and we just learned a lot, I hope, and the presenters also got the good implication for all of you.